Daniel, Julia, Daniel, I didn't get to say goodbye. Julia, there's something I have to tell you. Excuse me, sorry. Can you please move? You remind me of my little doodle. Don't touch me, Julia. No. Julia, oh, come on. Leave it, Julia,
Hello everyone, welcome back to Debating for America's Youth. Today I'm interviewing a very special guest who I've absolutely loved his YouTube videos, his performance at NSDA Nationals on YouTube. His name is Jake Wallack. He was the 2016 National Champion in Humorous Interpretation and the 2015 Finalist in Humorous Interpretation at NSDA Nationals. Welcome, Jake.
Hi, thanks. Such a kind introduction.
So just to begin, if you... Can I say that one more time?
It was just a really kind introduction.
Well, I've absolutely loved your performances. You're an absolutely great actor and performer.
Thank you.
And how did you get started in speech and debate? What made you initially interested in speech and debate, and what made you want to stay?
Sure. So my sister did it, and did the same events I did. So I did most interp events. I think I did every one at least once. So she was 2 years ahead of me, so she was a junior when I was a freshman, so I'd seen her do it for 2 years. Don't want to say too many times in this interview. Jesus. So she did it, and I went to high school that didn't have speech and debate for a year. So my first year of high school, I didn't do it. And then I transferred high schools, and then I started doing it. Because I knew that she had done it, and I had helped her a bit, just as kind of a person to perform at, and I'd always been kind of funny. So my sister and I would sit in my mom's bedroom, and my sister would perform for us. And that's kind of how I was introduced to the activity. So to me, it was a fun collaborative thing to do with my sister for 2 years, and I helped her work on her pieces. So by the time that I started doing it, I already kind of knew what it was. Clearly I learned a lot from actually doing it that I didn't know what I was getting into just by watching my sister, but that was sort of the introduction that I had.
Pretty cool. I actually have two younger siblings. One of them does speech and debate, and the other one is a middle schooler, and she's kind of hesitant about it. But I'm like, you should do it. It's such a cool activity.
Yeah, it's very fun, and it's fun with families. My sister and I did duo her senior year together at a few tournaments. Obviously, sibling rivalry and things like that came into play a lot, especially when we were in final rounds together. When we were in individual events, we both did humor pretty well at the national level that year. So we would have final rounds together that got competitive. But doing duo together was its own level of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, me and my brother actually we did a PF round together, and it was pretty fun. We went 2-1, had a local tournament, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how people... like twins, when they do duo together for 4 years, I don't know how they do it. I mean, maybe twin relationships are different than the relationship that I have with my sister. But yeah, we had fun, but we also fought a lot.
Makes sense. So you talked about helping your sister doing her performances. What other practices did you do when you were doing speech and debate to get better and continuously grow?
Sorry, say it again? What did I do specifically?
What practices?
I mean, I worked a lot on running pieces, so I ran them a lot with coaches and things like that. But I also was always changing things. I never really stuck with anything for more than a tournament or two. If I had more than a week between tournaments, something changed. So it was a lot of learning as I went, I guess. I would start doing something, and then 2 or 3 tournaments in, it would have been perfected just by doing it in rounds and practicing outside of competing, obviously. But nothing really got perfect or pristine or clean until I had been doing it for a bit, and I was always changing things. So I was always a little bit messy or a little bit out of sorts at a tournament. The first round was always kind of scary because I knew that I was implementing something new. I think I changed something always. So that was sort of my MO when it came to doing speech and debate. So practicing skills ultimately came with, because I was changing things so much, I think both my junior year and my senior year, I changed pieces in the middle of the year for my humors. So it became more about the learning experience for me than about the finished product. I never was with something and just sitting on it. It was always changing. So that kept me on my feet, and it always kept it fresh, obviously, but it also made it something that I was always learning from and always practicing. Spent a lot of time just practicing it, obviously. I mean, I would stare in a mirror and make sure that my head was going the right way or things like that, but a lot of it came down to just doing it over and over.
And the reason you changed it up from week to was exciting for you, or why did you do all the continuous changing?
I mean, first and foremost, it was because I thought that it was making it better. Obviously, it's a competitive activity, and you get ballots and feedback, and you kind of have to sort through what you want to incorporate and what you think can kind of be ignored. Obviously, not every person's feedback is something that you should take into. I mean, you should process it and read it and give it its due diligence and accept that a judge or a panel of judges saw something that day that they felt like they had to write down. But I kind of filtered through everything and found the things that I wanted to change. I was never happy with it totally. With any performance, I always thought it could be better. So it was really for wanting to improve it for the sake of improving it, for creating something that I thought in my own way. Obviously, speech and debate is a persuasive activity, but I wanted it to have some sort of artistry, and I wanted to hone that art form for whatever it was. I wanted to make it the best that it could be. So it was changing because I thought that it needed to. Obviously, sometimes if a joke wasn't landing all of the time, or I couldn't figure out how to do it in performance, or I would get too tired, so I couldn't do a thing, like I couldn't, I don't know, scream at the top of my lungs, or else it would hurt, or I don't know. In performance, you obviously learn a lot of things about what it takes to do that performance, so some of it was just a feedback loop of the more you did it, the more you knew what needed to change to make it an easier 10 minutes so that I could get through it, because I always did things that were pretty physical, and I would sit down and be sweating. So part of it was that, and then part of it was taking into feedback from others, and part of it was my own opinions of what I was performing and creating.
Yeah, so in all of your pieces, you do a really great job of having very distinct characters. Like whenever I watch your piece, I never had the question of who are you playing during this piece. How did you build those distinct characters, not only with like your body movements, but also with your face? How did you keep characters very separate?
Totally. I didn't at that time have a lot of vocal training. I was a dancer for most of my life. I started dancing when I was 2, so physicality came pretty easily, and that was the easy part, which for a lot of people I know is quite difficult, but for me it made a lot of sense. It was quite easy. So and I also really enjoy just doing voices, so that was something that I could latch onto, and I knew that I could physically differentiate people because of my dance training, and I knew that I liked doing voices, and was like good at imitating my friends or imitating my mom. But obviously I mined my brain for all it was worth and tried to figure out who I wanted characters to be. And again, it took a lot of time. I definitely had characters that would bleed into one another at some point, and I had to address it. My junior year, the mom character in my HI sometimes would just sort of become Swedish, and she was supposed to be Minnesotan, and all of a sudden she was Swedish, and I kind of had to address it. Recently I tried to do a Swedish accent, and I just thought, oh, you gotta do a Minnesotan accent, and do it poorly, and then it'll be Swedish. But sometimes things would get messy or bleed into one another, and I'd have to address it. So obviously it's about keeping those things up and knowing how to say anything as those characters in that voice, and not just the things you say in the piece, because if you're just saying those words over and over, like you don't know how to do a southern accent, but you learn how to say your 4 lines that a character says in a southern accent, eventually those words aren't even going to sound like words to you. So part of it was just making sure that I could live as all of the characters, not just be them for the 10 minutes that I had to perform them, or, I mean, the proportion of 10 minutes, because some characters in HIs say 4 lines and then you're done with them. But I wanted to make sure that they were people that I could walk around my house as, and sometimes I did, and sometimes my family did. They would make fun of me and pretend to be characters that I was working on, because I made sure that they were people that I could pretend to be. They might not be the most realistic people, depending on what character it is and why I've made it the way it is, but I wanted them to feel like full, well-rounded people.
Yeah, so moving more to the side of the physicality, you talked about how you were a dancer, and before this interview we were talking a little bit about how you like kind of build your like physical movements. Like, for example, in your junior year or your senior year piece, when you did the one where you were like on like the escalator moving carpet kind of thing, and you were like trying to run back, how did you like work on that? What's your process for not only finding like what kind of body movements you need to do on stage, but also practicing them to make them look really good?
Sure. So the moving walkway thing isn't in the script. It all kind of came out of the way that the movie ends, is that people get on 2 like buses. I think in the literature it's called a tram. And they get on these 2 trams that go in different directions, and one of them gets to move onward, and one of them gets to go back to Earth to try living again, or whatever the plot is, however it says it specifically. And he gets off of the tram and gets like electrocuted, and he has to like run to a different tram. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. It won't make sense. No one will... Eventually people will drop off, because if you look down for a second, you won't know what I'm doing. So I was talking to my coach when I was picking pieces, because this was, I think, like December at this point. I was doing a piece I didn't like. I was trying to find something new. I think it was late November. And I'd watched this movie, and I sort of liked it, and I sort of thought it would work. But I said, what are we going to do about this? The climax of the movie? How am I going to do this? And I sort of as a joke said, well, what am I going to do? Go on a moving walkway? And she said, I don't know, maybe. And I said, what would I do? This? And I sort of stumbled through what it ended up looking like. So it was pretty clear. I think my coach said, why don't you do like Michael Jackson moonwalk, but sideways? And I sort of started with that, and it was really sloppy. And she said, yeah, I mean, a cleaner version, but yeah. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, that works. So, started off with that. Just the idea of like kind of jiggling my feet like this. I'm showing it. By the way, he can't see me. Jiggling my feet like this, and then it got a little bit more refined, and then we started working on ways to make it look like I was walking but not moving, the way it would if you were walking the wrong way on a moving walkway like at an airport. So it took a lot of time. And then there was the part of, how do I perform this in a classroom? Because it ate up space like nobody's business. So if I didn't come back, I mean, I would allow myself to trail off until I would cut to another character, and I would kind of move them in towards the center of the room again, so that I could continue moving outward and then move back. So it was a lot of just finding the right moments to move, so that I didn't moving walkway myself out of the round. But it was a lot of finesse. Obviously, I didn't fall on the floor in rounds. I only did that at nationals on the stage, so that was the first time I'd ever done that. I came up with that months earlier and never used it because it would have added a lot of time, and also is crazy to do in a tiny classroom. So that was something that got added, that I had in the back of my brain for forever and had worked on with my coach, but never added it into a performance until the final round at nationals. But because I have a background in movement, a lot of things came very easily to me in a way that they might not to some others, which is, I mean, it was great for me. But yeah, even with that training, it was still a lot of practicing and finessing things and trying to find out the right times to move and where. I was really diligent about setting up spaces so that I knew everything that was in these fictional rooms that I was creating, so that people, when I created them, they saw them rather than just seeing a person talking. I think one of my biggest pet peeves watching HIs early on was it was just people, and I had no context for where the people were, and so much of how we interact with people is it's about the person, but it's also about the context. The way you talk to your mom in the hospital, I mean, obviously those are things that you would say, but the way you talk to your mom in the hospital is very different than the way you talk to your mom in your bedroom or the bathroom. I guess that's a better comparison. The bedroom to the bathroom. The way you talk to someone is different. And I wanted to make those environments clear because I thought they were integral to the interactions. So, like, understanding where you are and who you're talking to, both are really important. So I wanted to really flesh out spaces, really know where they were. When I would coach kids, I would have people draw things out. I still coach kids, I still have them draw things out, because I know that it makes sense in my brain, and it made sense in my brain, but for some people it's harder, which totally makes sense. I mean, it's a weird thing to create completely fictional spaces and fictional objects that don't exist and make them retain their essence throughout 10 minutes of performance. So I think that whatever way you get at it, finding a way to make sure that place exists in your brain and allowing it to exist, whether or not you just have to pick real places and make them the fictional place. Like if you needed to make a kitchen, like I'm in my kitchen right now, maybe I would just make this the kitchen in my brain, so that because you have to create that muscle memory. I mean, we know how we interact with our fridge in a way that we don't interact with someone else's fridge. You know what I mean? Like it sounds crazy, but we know the landscape of our home so well. So knowing the landscape of your performance really well and being able to live in it, I think is really important. So whatever way you get at that, I think is really important, to just know that you set up the world.
That makes sense, and I think that can make a good piece a great piece if you really understand your environment.